Hi there, fellow cultists. This is DM Nell, and I'm back with another episode of Shadow the Demon Lord Talk. So today what I want to talk about is the new campaign that I just started. This will be a campaign diary, and just kind of give you an overview of what my campaign has started out as, and these diaries will basically continue as my campaign progresses. Assuming that my campaign does progress, which is always, um, it's always one. You guys know, it's always one of those things. Will it last? Will it go the distance? We'll find out. Hopefully it will. I've had a few successful ones so far. Hopefully this will be another one. So before I get started, I do want to mention a couple things. First of all, I have finally exceeded 300 followers or subscribers in YouTube. Woo! I actually have 301, and it's still a pretty far cry from the goal that I had set for myself for 500. I said at the beginning of the year. That was like one of my New Year's resolutions. And really the only reason I want 500 followers is so that it'll unlock the ability for me to post things in YouTube. And that's really about it. That's all 500 followers get you. It doesn't get you any money, that's for sure. Doesn't get you any prestige necessarily. So, yeah, but I still have that goal. But I decided I'm not going to... I'm not going to do nefarious things to try to artificially inflate the number of subscribers I get. All I do is ask that if you watch my videos and you like my videos, just subscribe to me in YouTube. That way, when a new video comes out, you'll be notified. Simple as that. If you just casually like my videos, and don't fuck with it. Whatever works for you. But if you do like my videos and you haven't subscribed yet, then go ahead and subscribe, and hopefully I won't burden your feed with my diatribe here. So that's that's the main thing I wanted to get out of the way up front here. So let's talk about my new campaign. So the reason I do campaign diaries isn't for vanity. My campaigns aren't any better than anybody else's. Really, again, like everything else I do on this channel, it is to help new players to the game kind of figure out, how the game's supposed to work, what the game's about. And since there's not a whole lot of support for Shadow the Demon Lord in YouTube, I figured that this is a good way to provide some support for newbies. There's plenty of actual plays out there for Shadow the Demon Lord, but for me, actual plays tend to be long and boring. I have a difficult time watching somebody play a game, but if somebody's giving me an overview of how their game went with some kind of DM advice or DM notes kind of interspersed, that's more useful to me. So that's what I intend to do with these campaign diaries, as I have with previous campaign diaries. So let's jump into this. So I'm calling this campaign Tales of the Demon Lord 2. And I kind of put Electric Boogaloo in here just as a joke, play off of an 80s movie that many of you probably don't recall. And I'll just leave it at that. But at any rate, Tales of the Demon Lord 2, and it does have a subtitle which I have left off because it kind of gives away the monster at the end of the book. But I know what it is. I just don't want my players to know just quite yet. So, yeah. My campaign is now in Roll20. The reason for that is because Foundry, which is what I usually run my campaigns in, has not the version I'm using is an old version, hasn't been updated to the newest version, And that's because the module that is the Shadow of the Demon Lord game system in Foundry hasn't been updated. Unfortunately, the fellow that has been managing that whole thing has had some personal issues and has had to kind of drop off the grid, at least from a Foundry perspective. And so until that system is updated to Roll20, which is sad because I really like Foundry and I really like all the bells and whistles in Foundry. But coming back to Roll20 does allow me to regain a player that I had lost before, because Foundry does use up a lot of resources on your computer. And if you don't have, either a strong computer or powerful internet, Foundry can be burdensome. So I picked up another player. So now I'm up to 5, and that's good. All things are good. So these are my victims. I have a human, and we just finished our session, or our second official session. We had a session 0, which I don't really count because we didn't play. So this is our second official session that we finished last Tuesday. And so far, the characters are level 0. And we have a human, Chikatinga. Then we have an elf, Ripples in the Pond. Then we have a clockwork, Meta. And we have 2 dwarves. One is Einar and one is Tordar. So I really like this party composition. This is, I think this is a good, diverse party to have. And I think this will be pretty fun to DM. Having a good party combination, for me anyway, really either helps to facilitate the campaign or it can hurt if you have kind of a boring campaign or a boring party composition. And for me, this is good. I like the balance. I like the fact that we have an elf in here. We've never had an elf in a Shadow of the Demon Lord game that I've run. I like dwarves. I always love it when players run dwarves. We have a clockwork. I love clockworks. And then we have a human, which every group needs a human, in my opinion. All right, so that's my that's the group that I have. So we are starting the campaign in this area of the Northern Reach between the Mistwood and the Haunted Forest that I invented, and it's the village of Starfall. So the village of Starfall basically is a village that is situated amongst a bunch of ruins, ancient ruins, and many of those ruins were created by followers of the Maiden of the Moon and cults of celestial worshippers, star worshippers. And so that's why the village is called Starfall, because it has a lot of unnatural, or maybe natural, but it seems like unnatural, celestial events occurring in this area. And there's a lot of meteor showers, some of which ends up littering the area around Starfall. So that's why it's called Starfall. It's a small village out in the middle of nowhere, very secluded. And the people that come here are the people that are, trying to get away from all the troubles of the world. And the world is troubled. Right now, this is my in my meta campaign, this is my 3rd official campaign, and it takes place in the year, what years take place in? 891, I believe. I'll have to look that up. 890 or 891, but anyway, it takes place after my last campaign. And this campaign is let me get to that later. This campaign is progressing the timeline of the world. So as you know, in the Empire, the orcs have overthrown the human emperor. The current orc king his name is Drudge. Slew the emperor and on his own throne and took over the empire. Well, this caused turmoil throughout the empire, and all of the nations of the empire have been placed in a position where they had to decide, are they going to bend a knee to the new emperor, or are they going to secede from the empire and basically be their own nation? Now, something that's facilitating this is that the emperor that was slayed or slew or that was murdered, he has an heir, and that heir is currently building up the nation of Tyr. The old emperor kind of sent him away because he didn't want the competition, but there is an heir in Tyr. And so that has kind of sparked a lot of the people that were loyal to the emperor to want to follow the new or the heir to the empire. Another thing that's facilitating this strife is the tension between the Holy Kingdom and the empire has always been kind of tenuous, but there's always been a kind of a partnership between the two. The empire basically, the new god was essentially, if there was an official religion for the empire, it was the new god. Well, the orcs were not looked favorably upon by the cult of the new god. In fact, the cult of the new god treated the orcs basically like abominations. And that's because orcs were created through magic, and religion and magic don't always, they're not always good bedfellows. So yeah, when the orcs took over the empire, that put a lot of strain between the Holy Kingdom, which is the seat of the empire, or the new god religion, and the empire. So the Holy Kingdom basically was the first to say, we're done. And they decided to pull away from the empire. Well, the empire didn't like that. The Drudge didn't like that. So he started to amass his armies of orcs along the borders of the Holy Kingdom to put pressure on them to bend the knee. Well, that didn't work. So the Holy Kingdom essentially broke the line of orcs, and war has broken out as of the start of this campaign. And so full-on war is going on. Tyr has joined the Holy Kingdom in this war, but all the others have yet to decide. So Old-Adin has not taken a side yet. Freehold of Nar, they're far enough away where they don't give a crap just quite yet. The Grand Duchy is assumed to be in with the Empire because they're basically puppet government there. The Low Country also is assumed to be with the Empire. The Confederacy has already seceded from the Empire long ago, so it has taken a stance of neutrality at this point. The Marchlands, also assumed to be part of the Empire, but they have not yet entered the fray because they are busy watching the southern border for incursions from the Patchwork Lands and for the Blasted Lands and the Blotland. And then we have Balgrendia down here that's far enough away from the Empire to not be pressured to take a side as of yet. But Balgrendia is not necessarily ready to enter the fray either. So that's the political state of the campaign that we're starting. So back to Starfall, we are in a small village in the Northern Reach, wanting to stay away from all of the strife that's happening beneath the shield or below the Shield Mountains. And the village of Starfall has a few players that I introduced in the first game. And the did I already archive? I think I already archived. Let me pull it back up for sake of this video. All right, so the village of Starfall I created. And you can see there's already a battle that occurred here. But yeah, I had a bunch of NPCs that I created for this zero level adventure to give the players people to interact with to help facilitate the novice path that they would be eventually taking. And so we had your typical village, had a blacksmith, had a dentist slash barber, general store. We had a couple of advisors, a village elder. Then on the outskirts of town, we had a coven of witches that just recently disbanded. We had a ghost wizard, we had a druid, and we had an old healer that presented herself as a hag. She didn't want people bugging her. And so all of these NPCs were around for the players to interact with. So basically, the zero level adventure started off with the elder of the town taking ill, and one of his advisors assuming the role of elder. And right off the bat, the players knew that something was wrong because there were two advisors. One was being groomed to be elder, and the other one was not so much. He was not really liked by anybody in the village. He was kind of like a snake in the grass. So it's the snake in the grass, Wallerdeck, who his name is Advisor Wallerdeck. And Wallerdeck had started the campaign off by announcing that the elder had taken ill and was not likely to survive the day, and so he was going to assume the role of town elder. This caused a big hubbub in town, and of course the players wanted to go check in on the elder to see if he was indeed sick, as they didn't trust Advisor Wallerdeck. So they go to the elder's house and they find the elder in a bad state. He was definitely on his deathbed, puking, crapping all over himself, and obviously not long for this world. So the players, they one of them snuck into the house. One of the dwarves snuck into the house. A rogue in the making, maybe. And he decided, he's the one that kind of snuck around to find out if the elder was okay. The others were kind of busy talking to the sentry at the door, which I had a Jotun as part of the people in the village here, and he was basically the town guardsman. And the Jotun was standing guard at the front of the house. Well, the others kind of diverted the Jotun's attention to allow the dwarf Einar to sneak into the house. So he briefly talked to the elder when the elder managed to gain his senses for a few moments, and the elder told him to go to the healer and seek out the healer and his advisor that he sent to go get the healer. So after leaving the advisor's house, the players congregated in town and they decided to do what the elder wanted. So they head out to Glinda's house. Glinda is out in the woods. She's the healer, but she presents herself as a hag. She's not really a hag. She's actually just an old woman that has some healing skills and lots of lore of the area. And so she lives out in the middle, the dark part of the woods, dark and creepy enough to keep people away. So she lives in a shack out there. So one of the players, Shikatinga, has had a relationship with her for some years. So he's familiar with Glinda, and so they all go out to Glinda's house. And but before they do so, a weird celestial event happens. All of these rocks start falling from the sky. So a meteor storm happens, and all of these meteors crash into the area around, and one meteor crashes into the village itself. And these meteors are strange, green, crystalline, glowing rocks. This one was about 3 feet in diameter. So before they left town to go visit Glinda, this occurred, and so everybody was, kind of looking at the weird rock that was emanating heat and glowing, which is never a good combination. And so the players told the Jotun to stand guard over the rock. Don't let anybody near it. It could be dangerous. And so the Jotun basically did as he was ordered, and everybody else kind of took off to Glinda's house. So they go to Glinda's house, which was in the middle of the woods, and there were meteors that had fallen along the way as well, all these glowing crystals. And so when they get to Glinda's house, they talk her into coming back to town to check on the elder. But before they get to leave her house, a bear comes out of the wood. Now, Glinda says this bear has been kind of stalking her area for a while, and she's managed to shoo it away a few times. But this time it wasn't being shooed away. And when they finally confront the bear in front of Glinda's house, the bear is all mutated. It's got, extra eyes all over its head. Its mouth is in a weird place. It's got tentacles coming out of its ass. So the bear is, clearly mutated, and when they strike it, it mutates more, and green blood, squirts out of any wounds that occurred. So they fight the bear. They manage to kill it, and so they decide, okay, something's wrong. We need to get back to the village. So they hoof it back to the village. En route, they find the body of the primary advisor, the one that was being groomed, and he was murdered. And so murdered and hidden in the brush. So somebody murdered him. They suspect Wallerdeck because Wallerdeck was his biggest rival. So they head back to the village, and when they get back to the village a few hours after the rock had fallen, they find lots of villagers dead, a bunch of villagers mutated, especially the big Jotun that was guarding over the stone. And so as they enter town, the Jotun is just out of his mind in a funky rage, kind of like the Hulk in the Age of Ultron, and he immediately attacks them. So they didn't want to fight the Jotun because they were friends with the Jotun. So they try to instead restrain him. So the two dwarves get a coil of rope from the blacksmith shop, and they manage to get it around the Jotun's leg. And then as a group effort, they manage to knock the Jotun down. But in the meantime, the Jotun's trying to attack them, and the Jotun inadvertently, in trying to attack them, slices one of the other villagers that had been mutated in half. But they managed to finally get the Jotun down, and they use the the Black Widow trick to calm, the sun is setting type thing, to calm down the Jotun, and they managed to bring him to his senses. But all of the villagers that were mutated by the Sky Stone, which we identify later as a Void Stone, stones that actually made it out of the void and rain onto the planet, actually managed to mutate the villagers with its radiation. And Glinda has some knowledge of void stones, so she advised everybody to abandon this village, to get the hell away from the stones. And so the player characters manage to do so. They basically go around the town. For those people on the outskirts that had not been affected by the radiation, they told them to go congregate somewhere. We're going to try to figure out what's going on. So Glinda is up here trying to help the elder, but the elder's dead by the time they get there. And so, the players congregate in the elder's house, and Glinda asks the servant that was tending to the elder if the elder had the token that she had entrusted to him. And the servant said that Advisor Wallerdeck had taken the token when the elder had taken ill. The token was basically the elder's badge of office, and so Wallerdeck took the token, and he's gone now. The players search his house, and they don't find him, but they do find a chest full of money, and they find a bunch of letters. Now, let me pause right there. Before this campaign even started in Session 0, I talked about what happened 6 months earlier, before the campaign started. What happened 6 months earlier was that a caravan had come from the city of Lidge. And this caravan had a couple dozen people, led by a couple of doctors from the Academy of Occult Philosophy. And these doctors of science were here to study the ruins on the outskirts of town, especially a hill that had an ancient observatory on it. And they wanted to study all the weird celestial phenomenon that occurred here. They were interested in space and all that stuff. And so the elder, who was well back then, invited them in and invited them to, to make themselves at home, but they decided they wanted to camp out in the actual ruins. So the elder gave them his blessing, and so they were off. That really didn't have anything to do with the next 6 months. The people from the caravan would come into town to get supplies and stuff from time to time, but for the most part they would stay in the ruins. So snap back to reality. We get back to our current session, and the players find these letters that this advisor had initiated with the academy, with this doctor that was leading them, Dr. Vordaer. And Dr. Vordaer had answered the correspondence from Wallerdeck. Now, Wallerdeck initiated this correspondence with the university because he knew that there were ruins in the surrounding area. He knew that they were weird. He knew that the celestial phenomenon in the area was weird. So he was trying to get somebody to take note so he could capitalize on these landmarks. And so he wrote to actually several universities, but the only one that responded was the village, or the academy, the Academy of Occult Philosophy. And so Dr. Vordaer responded and took an interest in these ruins. But he also, weirdly enough, in the letters, took an interest in one ruin in particular, well, two ruins in particular, the observatory and a mage tower, a ruined mage tower that was said to have an ancient book hidden within. And so Wallerdeck said he would do his best to find this book, because Dr. Vordaer said that book was integral to his research of these ruins. So it turns out Wallerdeck had invited these people to come investigate. Well, Glinda knew about the Mage Tower, and so when the players find out about this and tell her about it, she says that, well, that Mage Tower is said to be haunted. Yes, there is a book in there that's hidden. It's a vile, vile tome. In fact, I've been kind of watching over it for years until I gave that responsibility to Elder Kemp. And that's what that token is for, that he held. The token is the key to the chest that is hidden within that Mage Tower that holds this ancient, vile, evil tome. And so she said that if Wallerdeck gets a hold of it, then there's no telling what evil will be loosed in the world. So the players decide they're going to go after Wallerdeck and see if he's gotten this tome. So they go to the Mage Tower. And the Mage Tower was basically the remnants of a tower. Is basically just the outside base of the tower. The rest of it had crumbled away long ago. And there was something going on inside the tower. Some spell had been activated inside the tower. So there was these ruins that were encircling the floor, kind of making a pattern. And well, I guess I can show it here. It's pretty neat. Some of the things that I get from Roll20, some of the animated tokens are pretty cool, so I like to show them off whenever I can, if I remember what I called this thing. It's not the Hag's Hut, not the Bloody Church, Ancient Tower. Okay, here it is. All right, so had this ancient tower here. And so the players reach this and they start investigating, and they start hearing this voice whispering to get out, to stay away, leave his stuff alone. And so this ancient mage apparition appears, and the mage is telling them to leave his stuff alone because somebody had already come and started messing with his stuff. And stealing his stuff. Well, the players, before the mage really manifested to everyone, they had already started messing with his stuff by investigating the circles here, and they managed to make it to the center of the room where they find an invisible chest or locker, and one of the party members, Chikatinga, who braved this, he had to jump through the circles to get to the center. And I basically had him just do agility challenge rolls to see if he could time it just right. And he did. He timed it so that he could jump into the circle and then jump into the center. He thought the center would be a safe place because everything seems to congregate in the center as the circles merge. They still form a center there. So he thought that would be safe. So he made his agility challenge roll to get to the center, and there he just kind of inadvertently lands in this invisible chest that's already open. In the chest were a couple of items, but the main item, the book, was already taken. And the ghost confirms this by, basically berating all the characters for trying to steal his things, and telling them that the guy came earlier. The man came earlier and took his book. And so the characters ask the mage if they can borrow his stuff, because there are some enchanted items in his chest. If they could borrow his stuff to go retrieve his book. And so the mage is he's crazy. He's an apparition. He's barely there. And so he gets them to give him their word that they'll return his stuff if they manage to return his book. And they do so. And so one of the things was a enchanted item that was this magic rug that allowed them to fly. Well, it turns out it only lets them fly for 100 yards. So not too useful, maybe for crossing a chasm or something, but otherwise not too useful. So that was kind of funny. But the other thing was a magic wand and a magic hat. So they pull out these enchanted items and they give the mage their word, and then they head to the observatory. So the observatory is where the bulk of the scientists were camped. Now, this mage tower did have a camp, as you can see here, but they are all dead because another void stone here crashed and burned them all to a crisp. So the player characters didn't want to stick around too long, so they decided to head out to the observatory. So the observatory, the cultists, the scientists, they had come to the observatory, and they had actually built the ruins that were around the observatory. They had restored somewhat so that they could live here. They had 6 months, so they had a few craftsmen that they had brought with them. So they kind of restored these buildings, these structures. They were stone structures, so that they could work out of them. And then they restored the observatory. And they had brought their own telescope, or was it a telescope? So on the way to the observatory, another weird celestial event occurred. It was like mid-afternoon, so it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the players are starting to head towards the observatory when all of a sudden day turns to night. They see a fast forwarding of the sun setting and the nighttime coming over the sky. And then all of a sudden, within the span of 5 minutes, it's nighttime. And the stars are shining brightly. It's the middle of the night, and they're like, it's 3:15 in the afternoon. How can this be? Shortly after that, they see this beam of light fire from Observatory Hill into the heavens. And at the point where it disappears in the sky, a star kind of flashes into existence, a star that had not been there before. And so that star, it kind of manifests out of nowhere at the end of this pinpoint of light. So the player characters are thinking, this can't be good. So they make their way to the observatory as fast as they can. They find a bunch of dead scientists laying around, and they find a couple of orreries. That's these spinning celestial constructs that like map out a solar system or map out a celestial phenomenon. So they're like metal constructs that have these concentric rings with orbs situated on the rings to represent orbits and planets and stars and stuff like that. So there's 2 of them, and both of them have the chunks of this void stone that seems to be powering them, and so they are moving and generating this kind of a a sort of power. So the players feel like this is bad, so they chuck a couple of the dead bodies into these things to disrupt them, and they do. Both of them stop their spinning movement, and the beam that was being shot from observatory here just kind of flickers out and powers down. So apparently these orreries were somehow powering this beam up here. So the characters make their way up the hill and into the observatory, where they encounter Dr. Vordaer and Advisor Wallerdeck, as well as a mutant. And a fight ensues, of course. They manage to kill Vordaer, they kill Wallerdeck, and they manage to topple the mutant off the edge of the top of the observatory, and he crashes into a horrible death down below in the rocks. So the player characters managed to do that, and that was pretty much the end of the session. The aftermath basically was that they find out what the scientists were actually doing here. It turns out they were from Lidge. They were from the Academy of Occult Philosophy, but they are part of a cult known as the Seekers of the Wandering Star. And every 88 years, a star appears. And for some reason, these guys were here to observe the star's appearance, but also to try to make contact with it, because they believe that the star is not just a star, but it is an entity, an elder being that would, grant them power, basically, if they could draw its attention. So they use this telescope, which was actually also a communication device, to beam a signal to the star when it appeared. And so the star appeared, they beamed this light into the heavens to make contact. Now, whether they made contact or not, we don't know. Because, the star is still out there, but at this point, we don't know. So, but they find this out through researching all the papers and the journals that Dr. Vordaer had left. And they find the book, and it turns out the book is a tome known as the Manuscript of the Black Sun. But it's not the original. It is a copy. And Vordaer was actually angered. In his journal, he states he was angry because this is a copy and not the original. And so the rituals within are flawed. But it was enough to get him started in his attempt to contact this elder being, which they referred to as Atropos, the wandering star. And so they used this telescope and the devices they hooked up to it to try to contact Atropos. Whether they did or not, again, we don't know, but that's what they were doing here. So they collect all of the notes and journals and everything that the scientists that are now all dead left behind. And basically, they go back to the village. The villagers decide they need to relocate. So the bulk of the villagers decide that were not mutated. They decide to relocate to other towns throughout the Northern Reach. The main NPCs that the players were interacting with in the village, the Jotun, Helga, the cook, Farmer Ned, Eris, the blacksmith, all these are NPCs that were introduced at the beginning of the session 0 and session 1. They were all mutated, so they decided that they cannot go back into civilization because they'll be scorned and they'll be ridiculed and possibly persecuted by the Church of the New God. So they decided they're going to go even deeper into the wilderness, and they were going to head off towards the desolation, to a place that they had heard of that takes in outcasts. And this place is the village of Pariah, just north of the Westhold. Now, this is kind of a side campaign that I had started to kind of play with. This is a Weird West campaign that I had set up in the Shadow of the Demon Lord world. So I set it in like the outskirts of the Northern Reach, the border between the Desolation and the Northern Reach, and close enough to the Westhold to have a major settlement, close by, but far enough away so that this town is kind of on its own. And so this is kind of like a side campaign that I have that I play every once in a great while. And it's like I said, it's Weird West. So you've got gunslingers. It's not so much sword and sorcery, but the Wild West with weird magic inserted into it. So I love the idea. I just haven't ironed out all the details yet. So that's kind of like a side campaign that I'm playing with. But anyway, I tied the two together by having the people of Starfall that were mutated decide to go to this place that they had heard about that takes in outcasts. And in fact, Pariah does. It takes in outcasts because it's so close to the desolation. Nobody wants to live there except people who have no place else to go. So people that are hunted, people that have weird, ancestries that aren't accepted anywhere else and have no place else to go, they all live in Pariah. So that leaves the player characters. So the player characters decide they're going to, go out into the world and see what's going on. So between the end of this session, which was last Tuesday, and the beginning of the next session next Tuesday, a span of 6 months will have passed. And during the 6 months, they will have picked up their novice path. So in the course of this time, the player characters will interact with the things that they have access to. So all the NPCs I mentioned, all the ruins in the area, the ghost mage, there's also a druid in the area, Glinda, the former coven whose members are still here and there, and the notes and the journals and all of the material that was brought from the people from Lidge. And the Academy of Occult Philosophy. And so all of these things will serve as the impetus for the players to pick up their novice path. So that's how I kind of tied the level 0 into how they're going to select their novice path. Now they're still figuring that out. They haven't told me yet what they're going to be playing as their novice characters, but hopefully they'll tell me between now and next Tuesday. And so that way I can plan a little bit for how to get the campaign going. But I already have the next adventure set up, and so when we start that, hopefully they'll be ready to go with their novice characters. And again, 6 months will have passed. There will have been more things happening in the war happening to the south. The news may or may not have reached them by then. I haven't decided. But anyway, that's what happened in our first 2 sessions, our level 0. And so that's my campaign diary for this video. So I hope you enjoyed this. I am planning to do a campaign diary after every adventure. Not necessarily after every session, because that could be a little bit much. But after, and see this picture right here? I found this picture. Nice little picture of the beam going up from the observatory. It's not really, but I thought it was close enough. This is actually looks like it's underwater. But anyway, I just dig the art. I got this off DeviantArt. I don't know who the artist is. Otherwise, I would call him out. But yeah, it's a cool picture. But anyway, so yeah, that's my campaign diary, and look forward to my level 1. And I'll do a campaign diary after we finish that adventure as well. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching once again. Again, subscribe if you get a minute. And thank you all for watching. So hail the Demon Lord. I'm out.